Steve Leisman is in the Lion's Den at the CME in Chicago. Good morning, Steve.
Hey, Carl, I can tell you that Rick and I just had breakfast together en route to our 8:30 appearance on CNBC this morning. And I think I know why Rick does so well arguing against me, given what he eats for breakfast versus what I eat.
Where'd you go? Mitchell's? What was for breakfast?
Well, no, we ate at a great little restaurant right here at the Board of Trade, and there's some nachos in there and some chorizo and some spicy stuff, and I'm having there with my bowl of oatmeal next to him. I don't really have a chance, I realized.
But we're going to see a showdown between the two of you in about half an hour, right?
I know, but I did have some of his food, so it's going to be interesting.
Okay.
Meanwhile, I just want to share with you some of the really interesting commentary over the weekend from economists. But it's not just about the jobs report. It's also about oil prices and the effect on the forecast. First, what we saw is that macroeconomic advisors, Joel Prakken, we have him on at least once a month with ADP. They lowered their forecast by 0.5 point to 3 3/4 for the first quarter, in part because of higher oil prices and unexpected fiscal constraint in the first quarter, or at least lower fiscal constraint. J.P. Morgan comes through saying, you know what? The data we saw suggests that what we saw in the winter was really headwinds from the weather. But they say headwinds exist. They say headwinds from higher oil prices and the potential for tighter fiscal policy raise concerns about downside risks to near-term growth. There's that weekend commentary from Robert Melman from J.P. Morgan. Going on now, Joe Livornia over at Deutsche Bank is pretty optimistic. He puts up a chart that shows that, look, when labor picks up like this, the unemployment rate declines, GDP accelerates. He says, we believe the underlying hiring trend is poised to improve considerably further because economic output continues to rise at the same time that productivity is slowing. He says that's all good for hiring. And one more thing I want to share with you from David Ressler. Big question of what the Fed is going to do. Will the Fed focus on oil prices? Will it turn out to combat it with its interest rate policy? But Ressler says no. While other central bankers, hint, the ECB, may seem ready to counteract the transitory effects of rising commodity prices on headline inflation, the Federal Reserve seems keener to keep its focus on the broader, more fundamental forces that ultimately drive growth and inflation. So, guys, that's the discussion that's going on among the economists, at least, relative to growth and output. Basically, higher oil prices are a downside risk, but they think these jobs numbers are for real and could lead to greater hiring in the months ahead. Carl?
Yeah, okay, Steve, I'll tell you. Weird. Santelli just messaged me. He said that normally, in his view, you eat crow every morning based on your...
Joe, send me that email. I don't think he did that. I think that's part of what you do of stirring things up, Joe. That's my thing. That's my opinion.
Yeah, he might not have done that. You're right.
Hey, Steve, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
I was listening to your commentary in The Economist, reviewing these numbers, and obviously the job number on Friday wasn't a bad number. We've got 3 months now, averaging about 150,000 jobs a month.
Right in there.
But the total workforce participation rate worries me, as that seems to be drifting lower. Shouldn't we be pretty concerned about that?
A lot of commentary about that over the weekend as well. Great question. First of all, it stayed constant at 64.2 with the prior month. What seems to be the case right now is the biggest dropper-outers from the workforce, that's really what we're seeing, are teens between 16 and 19. They can maybe be brought back in. Another portion of it seems to be the aging population. So there was some commentary. I forget who wrote this. I believe it was Bob Bruska, who said, you know what, I'm not really all that concerned about this because part of what may be happening is an acceleration of a trend that was already in place before the recession. And you see that a lot with recessions, by the way, that once a recession starts, it accelerates an existing trend that was out there. It's thought that it would, first of all, it's bottomed in a way we've never seen before. It's dropped out in a way we've never seen before. The expectation should be that when the economy improves, some of these people will be brought back into the workforce. But the improvement we've had has been positive when it comes to people being employed and a decline in the unemployed. So some of the improvement in employment rate is for real.
Yeah, the number I saw was it would be 11.5 if it was the same participation rate from before the recession. The rate would be 11.5, Steve.
I didn't see that, Joe, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah,
I saw that it could be either way.
That I actually did see. The Santelli, he did not send But
It's hard to know what's true when you speak because you cry wolf so much.
I set up a straw man.
Yeah.
I instigate. But at 8:30, will you pretend that he sent you that you eat crow every breakfast? Will you?
Joe, are you saying you doubt your ability to stir up an argument between me and Rick? Are you somehow
I've never resorted
losing
I've never resorted to an outright lie before. But I don't know.
That's true. You did steep a little lower than normal.
Yeah,
that is true.
I did, but I thought it was worth it.
The depths to which you've steeped before have been pretty amazing.
Steve,
and now you're going even further down.
Is there a Leisman Wolfman? Are traders going to take your side?
I have no second here. That's a great point, Carl. I have no second. Rick has Wolfman. He has a bunch of other people. There are some guys who do email me that from the Board of Trade anonymously that they disagree with Rick sometimes. They're very few and far between, but they won't give their names.
Too bad Harwood couldn't take a high-speed rail from Washington out to Chicago to be there with you.
Well, he can't because there is no high-speed rail, Joe.
That's my point.
Thanks to the likes of
Why
you.
isn't there? Well, there should be one between every city. All those
Think of the jobs that
all those jobs. It's a great idea. Every town needs a monorail.
All those jobs.
Every town needs a monorail. We got to go. Anyway, thank you, Leisman.
That was great, Joe.
Okay. Is this Howard coming up here?
This is Douglas.
Doug in? Okay. Oh, yeah, Howard later. I thought they were going to be here. Lawmakers have until March 18th to avoid a government shutdown as the budget battle escalates on Capitol Hill. Joining us, Douglas Holtz-Eakin, former Congressional Budget Office Director, White House economist. Our guest host today, Senator Pat Toomey, member of the Budget, Commerce, Banking, and Joint Economic Committees. I thought we had HODI, which is what I call Howard Dean, on at the same time as Holtz-Eakin. That's how we should have probably done it, right?
Howard and Douglas?
Sorry to disappoint you.
Yeah, we've had him on before.
Yeah.
And anyway, Doug, welcome. It's good to see you. We've been going back and forth. We had an interesting dynamic between Senator Toomey and Roger Altman. It was we could not get these guys to agree that you can do everything through spending cuts. I guess your take, Senator, is that if you cause enough growth with spending cuts that the revenues go up and you may not need to raise taxes.
Well, exactly right. It's a combination of strong economic growth, spending discipline. It's got to include the long-term structural problems that we have as well as the shorter-term discretionary stuff. But I don't accept the premise that you have to raise taxes in order to solve this problem.
I guess do you agree with that, Doug, or just partially?
I think it's on the mark. If you take, for example, the president's budget that he just put out and roll the clock forward 10 years, he proposes to be raising 20% of GDP in revenues. That's well above the historic norm. That's not a budget that has a revenue problem. It has a spending problem, and we need to get serious about that right away. That was the message of his own fiscal commission, that this is a moment of truth, that we cannot defer tough decisions, and that our problems are on the spending side. So I am always encouraged when we see Congress get serious about that, and we've seen that in recent weeks.
Doug, could I follow up? Because you had a recent piece that you wrote where you talked about something I think is very important. Some on the other side are arguing that we can't cut spending now because if we do, the economy will fall out of bed, that we essentially need the government to do this deficit spending to prop up growth. Now, I strongly disagree with this. I think you are really undermining that argument, but could you comment on that?
I'm confused by the intellectual foundations of the opposition to this. I mean, as I said, it's the President's Fiscal Commission who said we need to get serious about the debt deficits, and that's a spending problem. And then you hear, no, we can't cut spending now because it'll cut growth, but we can raise taxes. In the models that those who have latched onto this argument, the Goldman Sachs or the Zandis, those would have exactly the same impact. And so I can't understand that. Moreover, if you were to do the kinds of things we know we have to do in entitlements, which is slow the growth of future, say, Social Security benefits, that would have zero impact in the short run, yet they're still opposed. So I find the sort of politics of this arguing completely incoherent. And on the substance, all of these numbers are much too big. I mean, we're talking about, for example, I heard Carl say that macroeconomic advisors had taken down their first quarter GDP growth rate over fiscal constraint. It's March 7th. There's no way, even if Congress were to pass cuts right now, that there would be any impact between now and the end of March. So we're seeing a lot of economists radically overreact to the substance here.
Yeah, and even Bernanke was asked about that last week, and he seemed just as befuddled as you are to some degree.
I'm mystified. All you have to do is look at history. It's just not going to happen that fast, and it's not going to be that big.
There was an interesting piece in the Journal. I don't know if you saw Wall Street Journal. A historian, a famous British historian, but he talked about one of the strengths that Reagan has was those great one-liners, and I guess one of them was, I don't worry about big deficits that much because big deficits eventually take care of themselves. And that's what we're seeing, isn't it? I mean, suddenly we all know about it, and the political will and the public, it becomes so paramount, at least in this country, that we don't end up like Greece typically, right? And we're in the very painful process of dealing with that right now.
Certainly. I mean, it is part of my job to be, the voice of doom and walk around talking about how awful the budget outlook is. But the reality is I'm terribly optimistic about this country because it is a pragmatic country. It finds a way to solve big problems. We are facing a very big problem now, but I am confident that those on both sides of the aisle will come together and do the right thing by our children. This is an opportunity to deliver to them a standard of living better than what we inherited instead of failing that obligation, and to make them safer. If we continue down the trajectory we're on, they will be less prosperous and less free, and that's not what Americans do. So we will solve this, and sometimes it's not pretty to watch, but I'm really heartened by what we're seeing in Congress right now.
Hey, Doug, what's happening to federal tax revenues right now? We hear from business leaders that things are improving. Is that being reflected in those tax revenues as well?
Yeah, I think what you'll see when April comes is some upside surprise on receipts. Certainly when we get market moves of the size we've seen in the past year, you'll get some taxation of dividends gains. The employment reports suggest payroll taxes are going to come in stronger, and we can see very large revenue moves in a very short period of time. I'm not proud of it, but we missed the revenues by $100 billion over the course of a month once at CBO. It's easy to really make mistakes.
All right, Doug, we're going to need you again and again. We talk no health care today. We're focusing on the budget here, but we're going to have to return to that, I think, eventually. There's some really interesting things coming up on the horizon.
The anniversary is this month, right?
Yeah, but some really great things are kicking in, which are going to get your attention, right?
I'll just say, Joe, that you cannot solve our real budget problems without dealing with health, and we have a lot of work left.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
This is quoted in the Journal op-ed today about the anniversary.
I did, yes. I saw that. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Doug. We'll see you again. We'll get into it there.
When we come back this morning, the insider trading scandal that is sending shockwaves down Wall Street.
Are you feeling them?
You asked me about this. Do you not feel the shockwaves?
No, I haven't felt the earth moving or...